It started out as just another quiet morning in the neighborhood, the kind where you expect peace, routine, and maybe the sound of birds instead of trouble. But for me, trouble showed up in the form of my mailbox smashed, bent, and lying halfway in the ditch. At first, I thought it was just bad luck, maybe a careless driver passing through. But when it kept happening again and again, always in the same way, I realized it wasn't an accident at all. The culprit, none other than the one neighbor everyone whispered about, our very own HOA Karen. She had a reputation for being difficult, always quick to enforce rules on others, but somehow always above them herself. It became almost like a game to her. I'd replace the mailbox, and within days, she'd accidentally run over it again. Neighbors started noticing, shaking their heads, but no one dared to confront her. The HOA looked the other way too, probably afraid of the endless arguments she was known for starting. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself not to stoop to her level. But when you've had to fix the same mailbox more times than you can count, patience wears thin. That's when I decided enough was enough. If she was going to keep trying to destroy something I owned, then I was going to build something she definitely never expected. I didn't yell, I didn't argue, and I didn't call the HOA. Instead, I quietly got to work on a plan that would change the game completely. And the next time she came flying down the street, aiming straight for my mailbox, let's just say, things didn't turn out the way she thought they would. The funny thing about living in an HOA neighborhood is that everyone pretends things are picture perfect. But behind those manicured lawns and strict rules, there's always drama brewing. My run-ins with Karen weren't new. She had tried to fine me once for leaving my trash cans out too long, even though half the neighborhood did the same. Another time, she left a note on my door about the color of my front door not being community approved. It was her way of controlling everything, of making sure she stayed in charge. So when my mailbox suddenly became her target, it felt less like coincidence and more like another one of her personal vendettas. I started paying closer attention. And sure enough, it always happened when she was the one driving past. She would slow down just enough to give the appearance of, "Oops, my bad," then drive off without even looking back. It was like she wanted me to know she was the one doing it, but dared me to call her out. The HOA board meetings didn't help either. Whenever I brought it up, she would smirk, brush it off, and somehow turn the tables by making it seem like I was exaggerating. It left me feeling both frustrated and cornered. But here's the thing about being pushed too far at some point. You stop reacting and start planning. Every trip to the hardware store, every little sketch I made on a notepad, it was all leading up to an idea that made me grin just thinking about it. I knew I had to be careful though. If Karen caught wind of what I was building, she'd find a way to shut it down before I even finished. So I kept quiet, worked late, and waited for the perfect moment. What she didn't know was that the next time she aimed her car at my mailbox, she'd finally learn what it felt like to be on the losing end of one of her own games. The more I worked on my plan, the more I realized this wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. It was about standing up to someone who had been using the HOA as her personal weapon for years. Neighbors would stop me during evening walks and quietly complain about how Karen fined them for having holiday lights up a day too long. Or how she threatened letters if their grass wasn't cut exactly to her standard. People were tired, but nobody wanted to be the one to confront her. That's what made her so powerful. She thrived on intimidation. I found myself thinking about the bigger picture. She could get away with something as petty as running over my mailbox. What else would she try to control? There was a retired couple down the street who once tried to appeal one of her ridiculous citations. They ended up paying hundreds of dollars in fines just to keep the peace. Then there was a young family who almost sold their house after she accused them of violating parking rules, even though their car was parked exactly where the bylaws allowed. Everyone had a story, and somehow it always came back to Karen. Still, the mailbox was my battlefield. It was the one thing she couldn't resist messing with, and that gave me the perfect chance to turn the tables. Every time I hammered another piece into place, I imagined the look on her face when her little game didn't go the way she expected. At the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that she might be watching. Karen was the kind of person who noticed everything, and if she suspected I was preparing something, she'd find a way to twist it against me, so I worked quietly, knowing that when the moment came, it would catch her completely off guard. What I didn't know was just how far she was willing to go once the tables finally started to turn. The night before, everything came to a head. I stood on the edge of my driveway, staring at the new mailbox I had finally finished. To anyone else, it looked like a simple upgrade, solid, neat, nothing out of place. But I knew better. Every piece of it had been thought through, built with the kind of patience only someone who had been pushed too far could muster. It wasn't just a mailbox. Anymore, it was a message. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining the sound of her car, the screech of her tires, and the smug look she always wore after smashing what I had built. Part of me wondered if she suspected something. Karen had a way of sniffing out anything that didn't go her way. At the last HOA meeting, she had made a snide remark about neighbors who waste money fixing the same things over and over. The way she looked at me when she said it, I knew she was already planning her next move. The next morning, I saw her car creeping down the street slower than usual. My heart raced because this wasn't her typical pattern. It felt like she was circling, watching, maybe even waiting for me to leave so she could strike again without witnesses. Every sound of her engine sent a chill down my spine. Neighbors were out walking dogs and watering lawns, unaware of the silent standoff unfolding. I forced myself to stay calm, to act like nothing was different. But inside, the tension was unbearable. I knew it was only a matter of time before she made her move. And when she finally did, the entire neighborhood would be watching whether they realized it or not. The stage was set and everything was about to collide. Just when I thought Karen was about to strike the same way she always did, something unexpected happened. Instead of speeding up toward my mailbox, she parked her car right in front of my house and sat there with the engine running. For a moment, I thought she might actually confront me face to face, but she didn't get out. She just stayed there, watching like she wanted me to know she was in control. It wasn't the mailbox this time. It was me. That uneasy stare lasted longer than I could handle, and when she finally drove off, I realized this wasn't just her usual game anymore. She knew I had done something, or at least suspected it, and now she was trying to throw me off balance. Later that evening, I caught her walking around with another HOA board member, pointing toward my yard and scribbling notes on a clipboard. My stomach dropped. She wasn't just coming after the mailbox, she was looking for a way to drag me into a bigger fight with the HOA itself. It hit me then that I wasn't only protecting a mailbox. I was protecting my home. If Karen managed to twist the board against me, she could start piling on fines, letters, and endless harassment until I either caved or left. And that was her special, pushing people until they gave up. But this time, I wasn't about to give her that victory. The problem was, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was one step ahead. Every late-night hammer I swung, every careful move I made to prepare, I wondered if she already knew. The neighborhood tension was reaching its breaking point, and I could feel the moment of truth creeping closer. The question wasn't if she'd strike it, was how far she'd go this time. The morning it all came to a head felt strangely calm. Almost too calm. The sun was out, neighbors were out, trimming hedges and walking kids to the bus stop, and I remember thinking for a split second that maybe Karen had finally given up. But then I heard the sound I'd been waiting for, the rev of her engine echoing down the street. She wasn't creeping this time. She was barreling straight toward my driveway, eyes locked on the mailbox like it was her personal trophy. Everything slowed down in that moment. Neighbors turned their heads. Some even froze mid-step as Karen's car lined up for what she thought was another easy win. Only this time, the mailbox didn't fold like before. Instead, the car jolted to a hard stop, the front bumper crumpling with a loud crunch that sent everyone rushing to see what just happened. Karen's face was a mix of shock and disbelief, like she couldn't process that her little game had finally backfired. I didn't gloat, I didn't yell. I just stood there quietly, watching as the crowd gathered. The mailbox was still standing, perfectly fine, while her car told the story she never wanted to admit. For once, it wasn't me. Against Hurt was the entire neighborhood seeing the truth for themselves. But just when I thought it was over, the twist came. Instead of apologizing or backing down, Karen stepped out and pointed straight at me, shouting that I had set her up. She claimed I had built the mailbox just to trap her, that I was the one breaking HOA rules. The board members who had been siding with her before were suddenly silent, unsure of which way to turn. And in that silence, I realized the real battle had only just begun. The moment Karen tried to spin the story against me, I thought for sure she'd managed to twist it like she always did. But this time, things were different. The neighbors had seen everything with their own eyes. They saw her speed down the street. They heard the crash, and they knew the truth. One by one, people began speaking up, telling their own stories about her behavior, about the unfair fines and the constant harassment. It was like a dam had finally broken, and all the frustration that had been building for years came pouring out. The HOA board, usually so quick to cover for her, couldn't ignore the voices around them. They stood there looking uncomfortable, realizing they were no longer dealing with just my complaint, but with an entire community ready to hold her accountable. Karen tried to argue, her voice rising, but for the first time she wasn't the loudest one in the room. The neighborhood had finally found its voice. In the days that followed, the HOA called a special meeting. Karen was stripped of her position on the board, and the very people she had intimidated for so long were the ones who voted her out. My mailbox still stood in perfect condition, but more importantly, so did my peace of mind. Neighbors stopped by to thank me, not just for standing up to her, but for showing that sometimes you have to push back when someone keeps crossing the line. Looking back, it wasn't really about the mailbox at all. It was about respect, about proving that no one neighbor should have the power to make everyone else miserable. And as I watched kids ride their bikes down the street without that constant cloud of tension, I knew the message had been delivered. Loud and clear, this neighborhood belonged to all of us, not just to Karen.